brain tumor. What is brain tumor?
But all other cells have these nucleus, and within the nucleus is where the chromosomes are found. Now, a chromosome is simply a complex of DNA and protein. The protein is called histone. So you find that the DNA is actually wrapped around the protein cells, because we have specialized white blood cells that actually deal with cancer.
Really?
Yeah, the natural killer cells. You know, I mean, we are so wonderfully put together. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But there are specialist cells within the blood, white blood cells, who do their work of surveillance looking for cancer cells.
What are some of the common signs of brain cancers?
Common signs of brain cancer, actually, some of them can actually mimic.
My name is Brian, and I have a dream to create a non-profit organization through my podcast to help spread cancer awareness and other illnesses that are affecting the world at large, and to financially support those who are diagnosed with cancer. My mom died of breast cancer last year, and I've set a target to hit my 1,000 subscriber by her death anniversary in March next year. You can help me to achieve that. I've noticed that 73% of you who have revisited this channel have not yet subscribed. Please, your subscription means a lot to the growth of this channel, and my promise to you is that this channel will get better and better and better, and it will help to scale the guests that I have on this podcast. Above me, there's a QR code that will take you straight to my YouTube channel to save you all the hustle. Now, do we have a deal? Thank you.
There's around 130 brain tumors and in this video we will be exploring the top 5 most deadliest brain tumor we think there is. Stick around to hear some of these signs and symptoms. We will be talking with my guest, Dr. Patrick Lowe. Welcome to the Ivy Cancer Podcast, where we discuss cancer, health, lifestyle, and healing. And today it is no different. Dr. Patrick, who are you?
Well, that's a very open question. I have a background in public health, and as it so happens, also health and social care. Many years ago, I was a research student at the University of Birmingham in their Institute of Cancer, as it so happens, and I did a PhD in that department. So my PhD is sort of in the field of genetics, cancer genetics, medical genetics. That's that field. I had a fantastic. It was a great department, I have to say. My professor was Professor Malcolm Taylor, but we also had a number of professors. The department was actually led by Professor Alan Rickinson, who's kind of semi-retired now, and also a very close colleague of my PhD supervisor was Professor Phil Gallimore, who is, I think, deceased now.
Oh.
But that's kind of my introduction, as you know, in a sort of professional sense, to the whole sort of field of cancer. But I sort of branched out from that sort of specialism, as it were, to focus in a much sort of rounded way, much more rounded way in terms of public health.
Okay.
But cancer is my first love, as it were.
Okay. I must say, I really do appreciate you taking your time out to give us this information about cancer. And we're going to discuss not just brain cancer, but we're going to dive in a little bit of breast cancer and prostate cancer as well. But I just want to let you know that I really appreciate, and also my audience appreciate your time. And we do not know each other, and I just want to take this time to show appreciation to Dr. Pastor Philpott, who introduced us in the beginning and give us this opportunity. So brain tumor, what is brain tumor?
Well, any kind of tumor really is an outgrowth of cells. So in short, cells have a control, a normal natural control on when they divide and grow, when they proliferate.
Right.
And when that control is lost, a cell is able to grow and divide and proliferate outside of its normal remit,
Right.
as it were.
Right.
And so all the tumor is a cell that has lost its control in terms of how it grows and proliferates.
Right.
That doesn't mean that it will grow and proliferate at a rapid speed. Some tumors grow rapidly. Some tumors grow over decades. But it's that control that's gone.
Okay.
And there's a variety of ways that control is lost. I mean, you asked the question about brain tumor, but this is the same for all tumors. It doesn't really matter what the tumor is.
Okay.
The general ways that a tumor occurs is that something actually happens, whether it's an environmental insult or some other kind of insult that leads to either a gene mutation.
Right.
It could be a change in the chromosome where you have chromosomes sort of breaking off and rejoining elsewhere. But it's where you have the damage of a gene, and then that leads to the misfunction, if you like, of the process that normally controls how a cell divides and grows.
Is chromosome a cell? Or
No,
not?
I mean we've got all of our cells apart from red blood cells.
Right.
I'm talking about full cells now. I'm not talking about pieces of cells like blood platelets.
Right.
A blood platelet is simply a piece of cell. I'm not talking about dead cells. So hair, fingernails, that kind of thing. I'm talking about cells that we regard as living cells. All of our cells, apart from red blood cells, have what are called nuclei, a nucleus. And within the nucleus of the cell, as I said, every cell apart from red blood cells. And the reason that red blood cells don't have a nucleus is because that nucleus is, in the development of the blood cell, the nucleus actually disappears because the red blood cell needs all of the room within that cell in order to carry the oxygen, in order for the hemoglobin, there to be a sufficient hemoglobin to carry the oxygen to various parts of the of the body. So it's lost the nucleus in its development. But all other cells have these nucleus, and within the nucleus is where the chromosomes are found. Now, a chromosome is simply a complex of DNA and protein. The protein is called histone. So you find that the DNA is actually wrapped around the protein, the histone. And it's that combination that forms what are called chromosomes.
Like I know since recently, I think it was sometime earlier this year or last year, late last year, the Cancer Society create a protein to detect early lung cancer in the body. I don't know if you.
I mean, there's a lot of things that go on. It's to sort of keep on top of what's happening everywhere all the time is difficult. But yeah, I mean, it's a fast growing field. It's been quite resistant actually as a field to folk thought that we would, have got the cure for cancer by now. Trouble is though, cancer is not one disease. Because cancer can occur within any cell type. Yes, the cause of cancer, how cancers start in the first place, is usually similar. It's a similar process that we know, but it involves so many different cell types, and so the treatments, the cures, if you like, are also as varied and as difficult to come by.
Are all tumors cancerous?
No, because you can have benign tumors. I mean, we're talking about brain tumors. There are benign brain tumors,
tumor.
Growths that occur. What makes a tumor cancerous is that when it grows, it pushes out beyond its normal boundaries.
Right.
Once it starts to invade tissues outside of its normal borders, then you're talking about something that's becoming malignant, cancerous.
Yeah. When you said the cancer spread above its boundaries, I've watched a podcast recently, and the doctor was explaining how a tumor becomes cancerous, and that begs my question: after biopsy, can a tumor become cancerous after a biopsy? In your knowledge?
Not quite sure what you're asking.
Because,
but yes, in other words, if you're asking, I can have a biopsy today, and they can find that my tumor is not malignant, or my growth is not malignant, or what I have is not cancer yet, because there are stages before it becomes cancer. So a cell, when it loses that control, will start to proliferate locally. Before it even proliferates, you may have other changes that actually take place within the cell. That's hey, that cell's not looking right, not cancerous yet, but it's not looking right. It's on the way to becoming cancerous, perhaps. So there are early changes that we can see that suggest a cell may be, becoming cancerous, but isn't cancerous yet. So they could take a biopsy, and that cell is not cancerous. So they say, well, no, you haven't got cancer. Yeah, it's probably precancerous, but let's not worry yet. And then 6 months' time, that same
I'm going to get to that point
has become,
because this paper here, I'm going to get to that point because my hand's shaking, man, because of what is on this paper. But we're going to come back to that. But what is the difference between primary and secondary tumor?
Well, a primary tumor is a tumor where the cell has changed. Let's say that you've got a cell. And it's amazing because we've got so many different cell types. I mean, there are over about 200 cell types within the body. But you're talking about several billion, probably about 36 billion cells that we have within the body. And any one of those can become cancerous at any time. So usually the question isn't how come I have cancer? The question is, why haven't I got cancer? Because the change can happen. You have, let's say within a cell, you've got a gene mutation that takes place. There are two types of genes that can malfunction to create cancers. All right. So we've got genes that are called oncogenes, and we've got genes that are called tumor suppressor genes. So let me just briefly outline. This is the simplest way of me trying to explain how you can get cancer formed from nothing to something. So you've got a normal cell. How does that cell then? What are the changes that are necessary for that cell to become cancerous? There are lots of different ways I can explain this, but I'm just trying to search for the easiest way, the simplest way that I can explain it for your listeners. We have genes that are called proto-oncogenes. Now, proto-oncogenes is a gene. All genes code for proteins, enzymes. Proto-oncogenes, they code because all a gene is simply a code that codes for a protein, and that protein will have a function within our bodies. Some kind of biochemical function in our bodies to do something. Proto-oncogenes, they produce proteins that are important in cell growth and proliferation. So when our cells actually grow, when our cells receive a signal that yes, now it's time to grow, now it's time to divide, that signal has to come from somewhere.
Right.
So a proto-oncogene codes for a protein. When that protein is produced, that protein will then tell the cell when to grow and when to divide.
Right.
There are other things then that come along, other proteins that can tell the cell, okay, that's it, no more division, time to stop now.
Right.
And it's that control that can be lost when it comes to cancer development. Okay. When a proto-oncogene has a mutation, so the gene has a mutation, there's a change within the gene. So when that gene now is read by the apparatus that reads genes, that we have within the cell that actually reads the genes. When the gene is read, it's not giving you the same instruction, not giving the cell the same instruction
Signal.
because the gene has changed.
Right.
So the protein that the gene is producing is not the same protein. So you can have, when the proto-oncogene has a mutation, it produces the oncogene. Now the oncogenes is the changed proto-oncogene. And so the proteins that are produced are proteins that can cause the cell to proliferate and grow out of control.
Okay.
Because the protein has changed. And so what the protein is going to instruct the cell to do has changed. On the other side of that, you've got what are called tumour suppressor genes. Now, a tumour suppressor gene are genes that encode for proteins that tell the cell how to fix damaged DNA. So if I have a mutation and my DNA is damaged, we have apparatus within the cell that will do the surveillance, and they'll say, oh, that DNA is damaged, I'm going to fix that.
Okay.
And so the cell does what it does to fix it.
Right.
With a tumour suppressor gene, though, what happens is you've got this mutation that has occurred in the tumour suppressor gene. So the genes that are producing the proteins to fix the DNA, that's lost. And so the DNA is not fixed.
So when you have
absolutely. So when that DNA, depending on where it is in the DNA that's been damaged, that can then lead to the cell, again, proliferating out of control, because, or the accumulation of the amount of damage can then lead to that cell, as I say, proliferating out of control, simply because you've got that change within in that gene. So there are genes that function normally, in a normal sense, that are required for our cells to behave normally. But when you get changes in those genes, that then you have changes in the corresponding proteins that those genes produce, that's where you get the malfunction. Now, I'm not sure whether I've explained that as simply as it could be explained.
I'm sure my listeners, we get it, because you break it down totally different from how I would understand it, as how I've done my research about it, and I really appreciate that. Normally, I think tumors have different grades. Am I correct?
Yes.
How do doctors normally grade a brain tumor?
Well, there's a system called TNM. Yep. T for Tango, N for November, M for Mike. The T in that triplet is used to measure the size of the tumor.
Right.
And so when you look at the tumor is either too small to measure, because you can have tumors that you can't see, as it were, with the naked eye at least.
Yeah.
So you've got the T is about what's the size of this tumor. Yep. And I think it goes up to you can have T naught, where you can't measure it. You can have T1, T2, T3. I think it's T4. So the N is related to lymph nodes. So are lymph nodes involved? I don't know whether you know, but our lymph nodes are very important for in our bodies, in our blood. We have white blood cells, and white blood cells are very much located in our lymph nodes.
Right.
It's in the lymph nodes where a lot of the work takes place, if you like, to fight disease.
Right.
And one of the problems that we have is that when the white blood cells attack foreign matter that comes in, so bacteria and so on, they are carried to the lymph nodes. When those same white cells, because we have specialized white blood cells that actually deal with cancer.
Really?
Yeah, the natural killer cells. We are so wonderfully put together. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But there are specialist cells within the blood, white blood cells, who do their work of surveillance looking for cancer cells. See, a cancer cell can't hide. You know, when you got a kid, I don't know whether you have children,
Yeah.
but you've got a child and you've got a chocolate cake that you've put in the fridge, and you've not put it on a high enough shelf. So when you're not looking, your 3-year-old child will go in, open the fridge, a chocolate cake. They can't believe their luck, and they will tuck in, and they'll have chocolate cake all over their face. So you come along now, you see the chocolates all over their face. You ask the obvious question, have you eaten the cake that mommy put in the fridge? And invariably, the answer will be no.
No. Right.
But they can't hide. Why?
Because it's all
They've
over.
got it all over their face.
Right.
Same as the cancer cell. Cancer cells can't hide. Once a cell becomes cancerous, it expresses certain biomarkers on the surface of the cell.
Interesting.
And so the cells that are doing the surveillance, trying to find these cancer cells, all they have to look for are these changes that have taken place and that are being expressed on the surface of the cell, so that they can attack those cells and remove them from the body. Those white blood cells can take those cancerous cells to the lymph nodes, and so that's when you get the lymph node involvement. And so when they're staging cancers, as say, the first thing they might look at with the TNM method is they look at the size of the tumor. They look at whether there's lymph node involvement, because if you've got lymph node involvement, one of the ways that cancer can spread around the body is either via the blood or via the lymph nodes, the lymphatic system.
Yeah, I know that when it comes to the breast cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know about the lymph node with the breast cancer.
Yeah, so when they remove the breast, they also remove the breast cancer.
Right.
I've got a neighbour by me now who's got had penile cancer, and very treatable. They caught it early enough.
Yeah.
So they can excise the tumour, but they've also had to remove the lymph nodes in the groin. And that's simply because when the white blood cells are dealing with the cancer cell, that's where they tend to accumulate in lymph nodes. So you've got the size of the tumour, you've got whether there's lymph node involvement, and then the M is for metastases. Metastases is when the cancer can be found in distant areas from where the primary site has been. And so I might have a primary tumour in my lungs because it's the lung tissue, the lung cell that has become cancerous. But untreated, undetected, that a cancerous cell from the tumour that I've got in my lung can be carried either in the blood, in the lymphatics, to the brain, to the liver. And so the place where it's been carried to, it started off in the lung, but it's been carried to the liver. The primary cancer is the lung. The secondary cancer is where it's been carried to, the liver. Or wherever it's gone, to the brain.
Right.
But that's the staging system that's used. As I say, that it's TMN, size, lymph node involvement. Has it metastasized? Has it gone to a region that is distant from the primary site? When it's metastasized, you would regard that as stage 4 cancer.
Okay.
Stage 4 cancer doesn't mean it's incurable. There are occasions where you have stage 4 individuals. It's scary.
I was going to ask you that question as well, because I've known, like, when it comes to stage 4, people's like, but there are people who literally be cured from stage 4 cancer.
They don't call it cure. They call it remission.
Remission, yeah. Right. Why is it called remission, though? Because someone break down the remission in our podcast some time ago that I've watched. And what are your explanation of remission?
Well, I think the simplest way to look at it is that it's undetectable. Right. So because it's undetectable doesn't mean it's not there.
But it can appear again. Absolutely,
and it often does. And it sometimes appears angrier than it did the first time that you saw it.
Definitely. So when we start earlier, we disclosed that there are more than over 100 different types of brain tumors, right? Or brain cancers. In your knowledge or in your fields of expertise, what are the top 5 deadliest brain tumor that you can think about?
Well, brain tumors is not really my specialist area, but in terms of the of brain tumors that can be really nasty, they've got one that's called glioblastoma. A blastoma is simply a cell that has become cancerous, but a blastocyte is a cell that can become anything, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that happens early on in development. Mm-hmm. Blastomas are normally linked with children.
Okay.
So glioblastoma is a cancerous cell, or a cancer of the glial cell. So glial cells in the brain, the business cells are the neurons, but there are also cells that we have in the central nervous system that have a supportive role to the main players. Mm-hmm. And the main players are the neurons. So when you talk about, you've got in our central nervous system, we like to talk about white and grey matter.
Right.
So if I said to you, what's the difference? If someone is saying that someone's really intelligent, do they normally say, oh, you've got lots of grey matter or lots of white matter?
They would say grey matter.
Grey matter. Mm-hmm. And that's because it's the neurons. Neurons form the grey matter. Okay. Those are the cell bodies, I should say, of the neurons.
Right.
Neurons also have axons. So these are bits that sort of go off from the main cell body.
Right.
And it's those axons that are covered in something called myelin. Now, myelin is fatty tissue, and fatty tissue is white in appearance. So the white matter that you see relates to the axons that are coming off from the cell bodies, but the business end of the neuron is the cell body. That's the grey matter. There's no myelin, no sort of white matter around it, if you like. So the business cells, as I say, of the central nervous system are these neurons, but they are very well supported. There are cells that support them. So the glial cells are one of the cells that provide that supportive function.
Right.
And they support the neurons in terms of nutrition, structure, function. But sadly, and there are different types of glial cells. I mean, one of the types of glial cells, for example, are astrocytes. And you can have astrocytomas. So you've got, any cell that we have in our body can become cancerous. I mean, it's just, that's how crazy it is. But as I say, the glioblastomas are particularly nasty in children. I've also mentioned the astrocytes.
Right.
You've got one called the anaplastic astrocytoma. So that's another nasty one that I can think of. But there are many others.
Right.
Those are two nasty ones.
What are some of the common signs of brain cancers?
Common signs of brain cancer actually, some of them can actually mimic signs of a stroke. Funnily enough,
Really?
And so you got to be careful what's actually happening in the person that's being viewed. So, for example, if someone has a brain tumor, a handful of signs, and you see what I mean when I say it can mimic, or it can look like a stroke as well.
Right.
It can affect speech. So that's one of the things you look for. Another sign is nausea, vomiting. Folk actually being sick. Nausea, that's just that sense that you want to be sick, but you're not quite sick.
Right.
But you can actually have a lot of vomiting. So you've got nausea and vomiting. You've got slurring of speech, or some other, impacts of your speech. You just can't get your words out.
Right.
You've got problems with memory. That's also an issue. Problems with your balance. Yeah. Because we can have tumors that actually affect our medulla, and the medulla, which is somewhere near the base of the brain, functions. One of the functions, it's to do with our balance, how we walk, or to stay on our feet. So. And those it can also affect, one of the tumors, one of the really nasty ones that affect children is the medulloblastoma, which is really common in children as well, by the way, where you're affecting the organ in the back of your base of your brain. And one of the things that can be affected is paralysis, where you sort of lose sensation on one side of the body or another. So you can see the similarities.
Typically, like the strokes.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about blur visions?
Vision,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting that it's similar. The signs that you just displayed, it's similar to strokes.
Yeah.
So very interesting.
Can be.
So cancer, over 100 years ago, the spikes comparing to 100 years now is really high. What you think are some of the causes why cancer rate is going up so high?
This is probably going to be the most important thing that I share with your listeners, because it's about lifestyle. There are so many cancers. There's so many diseases that are lifestyle diseases.
Right.
And one of the lifestyle diseases, huge, is cancer. Now, what I mean by lifestyle, I'm talking about level of physical activity. I'm talking about diet. I'm talking about, just the way that people, I say people, but particularly men, are not tuned in to what's actually going on with their bodies. I'm sure you had this discussion with the person that you had in, talking
Derek.
about prostate cancer earlier.
Right.
But because of the component or the lifestyle component of cancers, that's the thing that we can change. There is so much that we can change when it comes to cancer. There's so many cancers that can be prevented. And I guess the best example, I don't know whether you remember, there was a journalist actually called Dan Buettner, who he's an American, and he went around the world. He noticed actually on his holidays that around the world that there seemed to be groups of people that were overrepresented amongst the centenarians, people who lived 100 years and beyond. And they weren't just living 200 years and beyond; they were living, healthily.
Is that the blue zone?
He was the one that came up with the concept of the blue zone.
Oh,
absolutely.
Okay.
And he located some places around the world. So he located, for example, this place called Okinawa.
Japan.
In Japan.
Right.
There was a place called, I'll probably get the pronunciation wrong, but it looks as though the pronunciation is Ovoda. Okay, but I know that in Spanish, how you see things is a different pronunciation altogether.
Yeah.
Sardinia. And anyway, you notice these various places around the world, and one of the places, what all the other places had in the blue zones, what they all have in common is that the individuals are genetically related.
Right.
But there's one place that he noticed that nobody was genetically related, and yet they had amongst the highest centenarians. In fact, I think there was one surgeon that was still practicing, and he was in his 90s. I think he was 92 or something, practicing surgeon. Whether or not you'd let a 92-year-old surgeon
should be just relaxing,
sort of work on you is another story. But hand as steady as anything, amazing. But the difference with this group is that this group was made up from people from all over the world.
Right.
So of course, if you're looking at what was going on in Sardinia, if you're looking at what's going on in Okinawa,
right.
All these people are genetically related.
Right.
They're all Japanese, or they're all Sardinians. But in this one place that was in California, massive community, Loma Linda, California.
Yeah.
The only thing these individuals had in common was their faith, and the perspective they were coming from a faith perspective.
Is this the Adventists?
They were Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
And in fact, that public health gentleman that died on holiday, Michael, what was his surname?
Is it that
he did quite a few series actually on health. He'd do some strange things, but he also went over to this particular community in Loma Linda and did I can't think of his name. His name's just popped out of my mind. But his first name is Michael, and he died on holiday, if you recall. It was a big thing. It was big in the news. His surname will come to me again, but he's a well-known public health specialist, or was before he died. But this group, all they have in common is their perspective on health.
Right.
So their diet, physical activity, their concept in terms of how important sleep is, how important, drinking a certain amount of water every day. You're talking about 1.5, 2 liters minimum a day. Making sure that you get enough sunlight, so that your skin's producing that all important vitamin D. Right. Of course. And as we know, vitamin D is more than a vitamin. It's a hormone, right. and that does all sorts of good things. Very important, actually, also in helping the body deal with cancer.
Vitamin D.
Vitamin D, yeah, really important.
Interesting.
Simply because of its impact on the immune system. So when it comes to what we can do, diet is right up there. Physical activity is right up there. One of the worst risk factors, best risk factors, depending on how you look at it. It's both worst and the best. In terms of a risk factor that we need to avoid is obesity, for example.
Obesity,
major when it comes to things like breast cancer, ovarian.
I've seen a research with that.
Yeah. And again, there are reasons for that. Not wanting sort of to shoot off down an alleyway, but the best way that anybody can detox, we hear all these weird and wonderful ways of how we can detox the human body. Drink this, have a go at that. Best way we can detox is to lose weight, because a lot of the toxins are actually stored in our fatty tissues.
Yeah.
And so, you're I noticed you're a really good body size. I can't see an ounce of fat on you. But if you were a big fella, I'd say that you need to way to detox.
What's funny is that I'm planning to go on a 3-day dry fasting as well.
Well, let me tell you a leading to a secret. In March this year, I did a 7-day water only.
Really?
Yeah.
I did a 3-day water only recent. Well, not water only, but like a green juice fast.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But I'm going on a dry fast for 3 days.
Okay. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, sorry, I was because this one is just so big. I mean, you probably want to move on, but
No, we can carry on.
In terms of what we can do, let's look at diet, because this is where you're now telling people what they don't want to hear. You know, this is where folks start to stone you.
Yeah, a lot.
Because you're now starting to meddle with,
Play with their food.
you're playing with their food, and you can tell them about exercise, you can tell them about drinking
Don't
water.
play with their food.
Don't mess with their food. But you know, it's the food that is the crucial thing.
Yeah.
As Rastafarians, or a certain segment, a certain group of Rastafarians will say, you know, their food is their medicine.
Right.
And it's really important. So when we look at foods, sadly, a lot of the problems are linked with the meat and dairy, the meat and livestock industry and the dairy industry. So in order to reduce our risk of cancer when it comes to our diet, we've really got to reduce our consumption of meat,
Right.
particularly processed meats, red meats as
Yeah.
well, and also dairy. We've got to cut that dairy right.
I cut out dairy up my diet.
So you cut
that's
it down.
for sure.
I mean, I'm not a meat eater.
I cut it down.
I
a
don't
lot.
touch dairy.
Yeah.
But it's really important. I mean, when you're talking about processed meats, you're talking about bacon, you know, sausages, deli meats.
I've heard about the deli meat as well.
All of their wonderful variety. And the reason is because those processed meats contain high quantities of nitrites and also some nitrates. But it's the nitrates that are really important. Both nitrates and nitrites are significant when it comes to development of cancer. But the key one to focus on is, whilst it's important to be aware of both, it's the nitrites that you've got to be really worried about, because nitrites can be converted to nitrosamines. And nitrosamines are what is thought to be the carcinogen. So that's really important.
I need to look up that.
So we need to cut that out. When it comes to red meat, again, we've got the same problem, in the sense that when I say red meat, I'm talking about pork, beef, lamb, that sort of thing.
Right.
When you use dry heat, so you're grilling or you're charring those red meats, there's a chemical change that takes place in the meat. And that chemical change leads to, or produces, what are known as heterocyclic nitrosamines, heterocyclic amines, or what they're also called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And those are the carcinogens. So
and this is when you're grilling.
When you're grilling, you know, you're barbecuing, you're charring, you've got that chemical change that takes place in the meat. So you've got the heterocyclic amines, and you've got the polycyclic, as I say, aromatic hydrocarbons. Deadly, absolutely deadly. So,
this is interesting.
Summer comes, folk will go out in the back garden, they'll get their barbecue, you know, and they're barbecuing. And what are they barbecuing? They're barbecuing not just
they're barbecuing cancer.
They're barbecuing the sausages, and we've just spoken about
my
sausages
days.
and the way that how sausages will impact on...
They're barbecuing cancer, man.
But it's not just that. So it's not just the meat, it's also sugar.
Right,
Sugar
I know
is
about the sugar.
Killer. You know?
Right.
Sugar, the glucose, can feed cancer cells. You know, cancer cells feed off of glucose.
You know, Dr. Thomas Seyfried.
Not by name.
Is a professor. Is a specialized in cancer. He was the one who opened my eyes to sugar and cancer.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I know about that part. Right.
Yeah. And, you know, it's not just, I mean, as a family now, we don't buy sugar. Yeah. Doesn't mean that we don't. In fact, I give sort of seminars and lectures on cancer quite a lot. And I will generally say to someone, okay, I want you, when you do your shopping, you know, your big shop this week, do not put anything in the basket, just 1 week's worth of shopping, that has sugar in it. Yep.
Massive difference.
It's not the difference, it's how hard it is. Everything has got sugar in it. You buy the tomato puree, it's got sugar in it. You buy the ketchup, it's got sugar in it. You buy the salad cream, it's got sugar in it. You know, you buy your
Barbecue
breakfast
sauce.
cereals, they've all got sugar in it. It doesn't matter what you buy. You know, some of the strangest things. In fact, sometimes I joke that the only aisle, you go up and down any supermarket, hypermarket aisle, you know, and all you see is sugar, 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 sugar. The only aisles where you don't see sugar is when you're going up and down the aisles where they're selling sort of washing powder and bleach and. But I joke. I said I need to actually read what's the ingredients on those just in case they've got sugar in. Yeah. Everything has sugar in it. You know, we live in what is called a sick society. You really don't have to do anything peculiar in order to get sick. You know, gone are the days when you have to sort of stand on your head, you know, and do some strange, weird stuff. You know, you do that, or you're going to get sick. You know, practically all you got to do is stand on any street corner and breathe deeply.
Right.
You know, just do a normal shop. You know, you look at what folk tend to buy regularly in their shopping basket. They're killing themselves with their teeth. And one of the issues, as you said, it's the sugar. Alcohol. Probably don't really need to raise that, but alcohol is a massive problem. There's this lie that folk were being told not that long ago where, you know, red wine, you know,
they always said red wine is healthy.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, why is red wine good for you? Why isn't, if it was the wine that was good for you, why isn't white wine as good for you as red wine? And the truth of the matter is, it's nothing to do with the alcohol content. It's to do with what's in the skin of the grape.
Oh, okay.
And so you're not getting anything from the red wine that you wouldn't get from the red grape juice. Non-alcoholic red grape juice. Buy the red grape juice, lose the alcohol. No amount of alcohol is actually safe.
Because they said alcohol is carcinogenic.
Well, it is, because it's implicated in cancers of the mouth, the esophagus, the throat, the liver. You know, it's just horrendous. The breast and the colon as well. You know, no amount of alcohol, no matter what they tell you, no amount of alcohol is safe.
Yeah,
it's the same thing that I was sort of alluding to when I was talking about once you start to talk about meat. We have in this country, I guess in any country, quite a substantial lobby group when it comes to the meat and livestock industry, it comes to the dairy industry, it comes to the alcohol industry. Powerful lobbies, lobby groups, you know, powerful interest groups, self-interest groups. And they'll talk a lot about, well, we're protecting the livelihood of people who work in that industry. And that's all well and good. Yeah, it's true. But having said that, are you protecting the livelihood of individuals? And I know that if individuals are not in work, that then has other spin-offs in terms of and implications for their health. Because if you can't afford, you know, to buy,
you have to just buy what you can,
a decent meal, a decent balanced diet, then that has issues. But it's you can't protect those industries at the risk of everybody else. So you have to tell the truth and leave it to individuals.
And a lot of them don't.
That's the problem.
Because they want to keep getting money.
Well, that's right. You know, it's an industry. The other thing that we have to be careful about also is how we are cooking those starchy foods. Yeah, so it's not just potatoes. Any high starch food, any foods that we're talking about complex carbohydrates. And because the reason is because when you subject, let's say the potato or the sweet potato, when you subject that to really high temperatures, like you get in frying, or you get when you overcook something, you get a change in the starch. Or that what happens is that you produce a substance that's called acrylamide. And acrylamide. So you think of all the times that I'm guilty just as anybody else, because I like my food to be hot. Yeah. I don't like to eat cold warm food. Yeah. And not many people are like me. They can eat their food when it's, as long as it's hot enough. Yeah. But I like my food to be hot. And that can be a problem. Especially if you're dealing with let's say complex carbohydrates, those starchy foods like potatoes and so on. And that's because the high temperatures lead to the production of this acrylamide, and acrylamide is thought to be quite a potent carcinogen.
Wow.
So again, you've got all these things that are taking place. I'm sure you've heard about the trans fat, right? And the reason that those are implicated is because they're implicated in causing inflammation. And we know that inflammation is also linked with obesity, and obesity, as we know, is a potent risk factor for various types of cancer. As I said, cancer of the breast, colon, ovaries, etc., etc.
As you mentioned on the breast, because based on time, I'm going to just jump some of these, which I really wanted to touch on prostate cancer. But these two papers I have here is the reading of my mom's. And a doctor never read these out to me before.
Okay.
I've just done researches and stuff. So given that you are the professional, I'm going to hand this over to you, and you let me understand more about these readings. So these reading was our first reading,
Okay.
right? And this is our second, right?
Can I ask if your mum had the BRCA gene?
Yeah,
You did. BRCA1 or 2?
BRCA1.
Okay. So the BRCA1 gene is found on chromosome 17. We've got 23 pairs of chromosomes. The BRCA1 gene is found on chromosome 17. BRCA2 gene is found on chromosome 13. We know that the BRCA gene is linked with breast cancer and ovarian cancer in women, but the BRCA gene is also linked with prostate cancer and pancreatic cancer in men. So if you've got a first degree relative that has the BRCA gene, you should get yourself checked out, because you would be predisposed to pancreatic cancer and prostate cancer. That's just a take-home story for anybody who has a relative that has BRCA gene.
Yeah. Could you just look on this, please?
Okay, so they've done a... All right, so just as we were speaking, they've done a 5 regular portions of yellow, brown, fiber, fatty tissue. Yeah, they looked at that. Okay, all right. So they've done their biopsy here. The histology is where they're just looking at what the cells are saying within the sample.
So that first one that says benign.
Yep. So what's the date of this? So yep. So this is February the 7th. Okay. Yeah. So it's non-proliferative. Yeah. Well, it says non-proliferative. So there's the changes are not there. And the reason they're talking about the duct here, they say some areas show mild duct ectasia, is because one of the types of, several of the types of breast cancer involve the duct. Those are the milked duct. Those are the tubes that are leading to the, and that can happen in both men and women, by the way. Men have obviously less breast tissue, but the same types of breast cancer can occur in men that involve the duct.
Okay.
Okay, so they're seeing some atypical hyperplasia. So hyperplasia is where you've got this growth taking place, this change of the cells actually taking place, but it's not cancerous. So you can have hyperplasia. It's a bit like the prostate. So the prostate can increase in size, but just because your prostate has increased in size doesn't mean it's going to be cancerous. When it increases in size, it's known as a hyperplastic prostate. So this hyperplasia, it just means that the cells have grown.
Okay.
Yep, no obvious malignancy. Okay.
So on that one, the doctor said, go and do a follow-up.
Okay.
It's not cancerous now.
Yeah. I mean, they're saying that there are changes. They're seeing cellular changes, but they're saying that they've in the sample that they have, they can't see any evidence.
Okay. So that one now.
All right. So this is now 5 months later. Yep, and so they're looking at the same breast, the right. All right, and they're saying what was found in the previous examination. Yeah, the focal atypical hyperplasia. All right. So there's a difference in color now in the biopsy.
Color.
Yep. So now it's tan white, whereas before it was yellow fatty. They were just looking at, which is the normal, yellow fatty is normal tissue. But the color's changed. And now they're looking at the duct and they're seeing invasive cancer in the ducts. Yeah. Okay. And I think that this is, and they're saying that, again, when you're talking about where the cancer can actually develop, you know, you've got the nipple, you've got the ducts, and so on. But they're saying they're not seeing anything within those areas of what they're looking at here. I think it does illustrate my point earlier on when I was saying that.
Yeah, that's
they
what I
could
wanted
find
to
something,
say.
and then 6 months later.
That's what I wanted to say.
And I used that exact time frame, didn't I?
Yeah. That's what I wanted to say. That's why I said to you, I want you to hold that point, because what happened here is what you were saying earlier.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And the unfortunate thing about it, that second test, my mom didn't got it in time.
Oh no.
She didn't got it in time. Because
well, the sad thing is that when did they do her when did they look at her genetic profile? When did they identify the BRCA gene?
they identified the BRCA gene, I think, in the second one.
That should have been something.
No,
they would
the
have done in
hospital identify the BRCA genes, because they were the one who told us.
Yes.
Because it wasn't on these reports.
I see. Okay.
So they were the one who told us she has the BRCA gene, the BRCA1 mutation, and that's when I started.
Sorry, I'm looking at this. You know, this is back home.
Back home, yeah.
Okay. I think over here they'd have done it straight away.
No, it's not over here.
Yeah, but they'd have looked at that because it's so standard, and it's
so
such
it bids me know, because when I started to doing some research, that I am at high risk.
Yes.
Because my mom had in the BRCA.
Okay. So before I said that, you knew that already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, thanks for reading this out for me. It was a bit, got a bit emotional looking on it.
I'm sure.
To be honest with you, but she didn't get the fair chance that she should have gotten.
No. If she was in this country, and again, I mean, I'm looking at the date, and I don't know whether the system just got overwhelmed, because the system over here was overwhelmed. Because I'm talking about it being post-COVID, and because there weren't a lot of stuff. I mean, I had a good friend of mine that died from bowel cancer during COVID, and he, you know, his consultants were, or his consultancies were always were being done via Zoom. You know, and it was, and then you had the backlog, and if a health system like ours, you know, was overwhelmed in the way that it is, I mean, they're still trying to deal with some of the backlog. What about in the Caribbean?
Yeah.
So it might have been because they were just overwhelmed.
With the first test, it was a private hospital. She got that within 2 weeks.
Okay.
The second one was a public hospital.
Right.
They told her, come back within 2 weeks' time for your result. She went there 3 times and it wasn't ready.
Oh dear.
Over a period of 2 months. And it's after she started getting sick, she went to the hospital and it's already late. Because on the second one, I think it said that she was at stage 2 at that point.
Okay.
But if she knew that she was at stage 2 at that point, then we could have known what to do.
Of course. Absolutely.
But she didn't get the result. When she went to the hospital, they diagnosed her for stage 4. So that leads to my question, like, how does a breast cancer spread? Like, what would be the first place a breast cancer would move to when spreading?
I don't think we can say the first place necessarily, but breast cancers can go anywhere. You know, they can go to the lung, they can go to the liver.
Hers was at the lung,
There you go.
the liver,
Yeah.
the brain, and the bone.
Yeah.
That's where hers was.
So that's where she developed the sarcoma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our left eye was swollen. So I'm thinking, because when I've done my research, that's why I asked you about the secondary cancer, because they said that when the cancer moves from the brain, from the breast,
yeah.
or from the body and goes to the brain, it classifies as a secondary cancer.
Well, anywhere that it goes
Anywhere.
to would be secondary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So on this list, it was talking about the five, the braid four. What is the braid for? Is that a grading system as well?
So clinical features, right breast, US done, speculated mass, ERADS. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is.
Okay.
Yeah, they've graded the tumor. Yeah, so you've got size here. Grade 3. This is the second. Yeah, this is the second one. They've graded the single focus invasive. So is there another report then where you had?
There's a next report which was at the hospital, but I just wanted this one as a closure.
Okay.
So I didn't went back, and time wouldn't allow me as well. So I didn't went back to the hospital where she unfortunately succumbs to her. So
did you get to see her before she?
Yeah, I had to go to Jamaica, and I went there for 2 weeks, and before the 2 weeks up, she was gone. So I had to come back to the UK and go back to Jamaica to then lay her to rest, unfortunately.
She was a young lady, young woman.
I think, yeah, very young. I think there was some negligence on that hospital, because even when she passed, if you see the date, she passed in March 2023, and you see the date on that, that's when I got the report after she passed. So that's well over 8-9 months.
It doesn't make any sense. It's got the date specimen was taken on the 27th of July 22, and it's got date reported 26th of April 23. Why the delay?
Because, exactly. So they didn't give her the results, and that's what,
that's really serious.
Yeah. I've literally could, take it to court, but my mom wouldn't want me to do stuff like that. So I just leave it as it is. You know what I mean? But,
Okay.
because the interest of time, I'm just going to close off because I know you have things to do. So I'm just going to leave whatever.
Okay.
So
I think perhaps on a future time, one of the things that I was hoping to share today, depending on how things went and how many questions you had, was to look at some of the myths that are associated with cancer.
yeah,
that would be a really good one to look at, because there are so many risks. What happens if I live in a place where you've got high-powered?
there's a lot of risk.
What about me using, aluminium-based deodorants and all that kind of stuff? There are lots of myths that are associated with.
You speak about Roland. I haven't used Roland for 4 months now. 4 months, going to 5 months now, and I'm not smelling.
Let me put up front. I mean, I'm not. There's no connection between the aluminium that's found in deodorants, antiperspirants, and it's the aluminium in the antiperspirants that are actually used to block the sweat glands.
Right, the sweat glands. Yeah.
But no, there's no link between that. Although there are rumours, that go around. And
I would have really loved to touch those.
we can do that.
I would love to touch those, but when you are available again, then we could, because we still had a prostate cancer, and I didn't know that there was prostate cancer in female, and I really wanted to touch that.
That's linked to the Skene's gland. I don't think many people actually know that.
That's why I wanted to touch it, but we could leave it for next time.
Yep.
But I do thank you for coming and sharing your time.
I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
Right,
Thank you very much.
definitely, and we learn a lot. So thank you guys for joining, and I really appreciate your support. And if you like this interview, please just give us a like and share a comment in the comment section and let us know what are your thoughts. And I want to take the time out to big up Flawless Fade for giving us the opportunity to share these podcasts in his studio. And until next time, stay safe, stay blessed, and eat healthy. Thank you.